Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song that you would like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's comes at us from Paul. It says, "Hey Bryan, I'd love to hear your interpretation of Clark, There's a Distance in You." Clark is what I would describe as an electroacoustic composer whose work ranges from ambient to industrial techno, folk, and film score. So that's what we're going to look at today. Clark. I like just one name. I dig that. Alright, the song's called There's a Distance in You. Let's see what electroacoustic means. Alright, so really strong bass presence. Interesting, like a tapping sounds where we would normally hear something hi-hat adjacent. Really cool bubbling sound over here that's gone now. Really great use of space as far as the sound sphere goes. Yeah, once again, really great use of spacing, panning this little bouncing idea around. And I like that brass really far out on the sides there. Kind of flashing. There's this upbeat dancing element. It's everywhere. But there's this melancholy that sits within it. Yeah, really nice. Really nice transition into this. Very wide. Getting very experimental right here. Free time, I think. I mean, there's still that hi-hat back there, but I don't know if anybody's really paying attention to it anymore. I think the first thing I want to talk about isn't something I probably would have even be I wouldn't be bringing up if it wasn't included in the context. But what does electroacoustic mean? How I understand it, and what probably influenced some of the ways I listened to this, was electronic music creating with acoustic instruments. Um, we had somebody like that a while back, and it was fascinating to we watched a song with just the cover art on it, but I went and checked out. I think it was one of the NPR Tiny Desk um, uh, live playings from this group of people, and it was interesting listening to them make dance music with a tuba and a cello and violin and xylophone and a uh, bassoon, I think, was in there, and a trombone. I think it was just like typical acoustic instruments, but just running them through audio processors and pedals and all sorts of stuff to change their timbre to something that was more likely to fit electronic dance music. And then they played electronic dance music. It was fascinating to watch, but I saw it or I listened to it first without knowing any of that, and I approached it just as a typical techno song. And I wonder if this is doing that same thing where we're making electronic music with acoustic sounds. And so that was the very first thing I thought of going into this song. And of course, I begin listening to the sounds that we have. Are these based on a synthesizer? Are all of these sounds created by a sound engineer? Or, well, I mean, in the end, I guess they are still created by a sound engineer. But is it all digital? Or are we taking sounds that we can make acoustically, recording them, and then running them through a bunch of stuff that makes them sound digital or electronic? And I'm not quite sure. There's definitely what sounds to be a shaker in here. Maybe just a little rock with some seeds, some pebbles, or some sand, or seeds in it, or something. shaking back and forth. There's hand claps throughout. There's one part that literally sounds like he's knocking on a desk. Now, of course, they've been compressed in some cases or had a little bit of other modulation, but on the percussion side of things, everything sounds acoustic to me. I wouldn't say there's anything in here that absolutely sounds electronic. Once we get to the melody, though, I think it's less sure, or I'm less sure of that. The lead instrument in the first half of the song that takes the melody, the panned sounds, that one jumping, hopping sound that we saw for a moment. There was this really low, almost sounded like a slow reverberation that was in the left side at the beginning of the track. It was kind of quiet, and I think it only appeared once or twice. Definitely a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. We had the sound sphere stuff really sitting on the outsides of the song, and all of these had massive electronic edges to them. I'm sure that there's a process to make a sound acoustically and then just modify it with 5, 6, 7 effects and end up with what they've achieved here. But I also have a really, really hard time, more so than the percussion sections or percussion instruments, hearing that original timbre, hearing the acoustic element still in the sound that these instruments are making. And again, I don't want to say that that's not the case, that these are 100% electronic, because I don't hear anything acoustic in here, but I'm just having a real difficult time hearing that acoustic bass line that these sounds might be created from, assuming I'm even coming at this from the right angle with it being called acoustic or electronic acoustic. I could be completely on the wrong path here, and this whole section right here has no relevance to the song, but being that that's how the song was introduced to me, that's where my brain went. It did make me really start to begin to think where these sounds might have originated. And like I said, I do think I'm at least close to it, because a lot of the percussion does sound acoustic, straight up. Very little stuff added to it. Maybe a little bit of compression to give it some kick, some volume. The bass kick, as well as the bass tone that we heard at the beginning, was very large, very wide. So it's, but still very bassy, not much modulation to it. So I am kind of curious where this song sits on that whole spectrum. Is electroacoustic exactly what I think it is? In which case, how did he create these sounds? And if it's not, then what is electroacoustic? Because I think I just wasted 10 minutes of y'all's time talking about something that has no bearing on the song. Now, ignoring where the instruments come from and looking at this entirely on the musical side, what's going on here? And unfortunately, I'm not so sure. The song is split up into 2, maybe 3 sections if you want to count the end as a distinct section, but honestly, I only really see the first half and the second half. The outro is sort of unique, but also sort of just an extension of that second section. The first part of the song follows a pretty typical dance, electronica, techno kind of thing. We have a very steady percussion section that provides a rhythm that can be danced to. There's no variation to it. We have a strong strike on beats 2 and 4 that provide a strong notion of provide a strong notion of groove and rhythm for people to dance to, or for you to bob your head to, or whatever this music makes you want to do. However you feel you should move your body to it. There are a couple of melody lines that repeat fairly ad nauseum. I think for the first 3.5 minutes, that first melody line that comes in is the same melody line. It's a 2 bar concept that we hear from the beginning of the song, or like 30 seconds into the song, until we shift to the second section. It is present. It does not change. It yeah, it's just there for the whole time. Much like a lot of techno music, it's not really about creating evocative, ever-changing, progressive rock tracks, right? Techno music, especially when you get into the realm of dance, is designed primarily to be danced to vibe with, to sort of just check out and feel more so than to analyze. And in that regard, it makes perfect sense for a lot of the song to be very cyclical, um, very looping. But we hear this in the percussion, we hear it in the melody. It's really the embellishing ideas which provide contrast throughout the first half of the song. And it's one of the things that I am most fond of when we talk about electronic music, especially stuff like this, in that every 4 bars or so, it feels like we have something new going on outside of, in most songs, what would be the core stuff. Your foundational work, which is your chordal stuff, your rhythmic stuff from your percussion, and your melody lines. That's really what a lot of songs outside of techno are made up of. But in techno, that is almost the foundation, and we get little variations all throughout that are the meat of the song. And it requires a very different perspective to listen to, and I'm still just warming up to it. I still find techno overall to be a bit repetitive. But I'm pretty sure that's on me because songs like this showcase how there is a repetitive nature to it, but it is not all that's there. I mentioned that for 2 bars, maybe 3 bars, there's this really low vibrating sound over on the left side. There's also that bouncing sound that was around for what, a whole 10 seconds. We had the panning sounds. We had the transitions that would wash over from one side to the other. We had some ping ponging going on. There were just a lot of different sounds being utilized, not just in the music itself, but also around the music. Really, really great use of the sound sphere and placement in this track. Sometimes we have stuff that is off to the right, to the left, in front of us, to the angles. Sometimes they're near to us, sometimes they're far from us. There were a couple of sections where we brought in these very wide sounds, just kind of on the outskirts of the music, really just filling out the space out there and reminding us how much room there is in this song to place instruments. It creates this ever changing but always static style of music that, like I said, I'm still kind of getting an ear for, but I think I'm slowly coming around to. I don't know if this is ever going to be anything I seek out in my personal time other than when I'm in a specific mood for it, but it is getting to a point where I'm beginning to hear some of the nuance, especially production wise, that electronic music is phenomenal for. Um, but what's really interesting is halfway through the song, I don't know exactly where we were, 3, 4 minutes into it, something like that. We just spent an entire portion of the track basically making a standard dance song. We have a static rhythm, a static melody, a static foundational work, and then an ever-changing series of variation and embellishment and ornamentation. Ideas that don't really stick around for too long but add character while they are here and allow the song to not feel stagnant from phrase to phrase. And then we hit the halfway point, and we had a really interesting transition because this halfway point loses clarity. It's almost like a veil gets lifted over it, and like a translucent veil, And if this were not a song, but some sort of visual work of art, it would now become a bit blurry. Like looking through, uh, I guess like man, like shower glass. Like showers have glass doors and it's all like weird designs on it, so you can't see through it. You just kind of get the colors from the other side, not necessarily the shapes from the other side of the door. Yeah, something like that. It's it almost, or another thing is muffled. Yeah, I think for a good auditory thing, the second half of this song feels muffled. It almost feels like you put on, you know, earmuffs, or you put a hat over, like a beanie that went over your ears or whatever. Kind of muffled things up a little bit. But it happened as a transition, which I thought was very cool. I'm pretty sure I pointed that out in the reaction. Just a really interesting way of having this wave wash over that didn't just change the music, but changed the sonic properties of the section as well. It went from something hyper clear and distinct to something a bit more muddy, just a bit out of focus. And I thought that was interesting. First of all, it's just a neat production thing, but I don't think I've heard a transition that changes the sound of a song before. Not like that. But the second half went for something very avant garde, experimental. In fact, I think this is a really great song for this week's theme, even though it's not part of the themed selections. It just happened to line up well with the theme. But yeah, it's an interesting mix between experimental, avant-garde kind of music and electronic, and possibly even exploring electronic through non-electric means. If I'm right about my earlier stuff. But this second section is just a lot of noise. There is the shaker in the background that kind of fills the hi-hat's role of placing a beat, but it slowly fades into obscurity until it can't be heard. And even when it can be heard, I'm not entirely sure the rest of the instruments are lining up with its tempo anyways. There are just a variety of sounds that come through here. None of them seem to be working together. I can't say there's any section where I'm like, oh, this is a Hocket, or there's call and response, or I don't see anything, or even something as simple as harmony. None of these instruments feel like they're working together for any added effect. They all seem to be going off on their own time, their own tempo. There's no worry about if they're on time with someone else or playing in somebody else's rests. It's just this is happening, then this is happening, then this is happening. It's just a bunch of segmented layers. It feels chaotic, but at the same time, it also kind of feels like, what if we took that ornamental stuff we had earlier and then just cut out the techno foundation? What if we just had the ornamentation? And what if we allowed the ornamentation to stick around for a bit? What if we made the ornamentation the spotlight? What if instead of you play a couple of notes and then don't play again, what if you play a couple of notes and repeat, much like the foundational work typically does? Or what if you hold out your last note rather than stop playing? And from that perspective, it's an interesting inversion from what we heard in the first section, where we had a strong foundation that kept us centered and ornamental ideas that allowed the song to flourish and show character. Now the ornamental stuff is the foundation, and the character is the droning that goes on in the background. I don't know. It's a very interesting way to go about composing a section. But it also harkens back to very core ideas of free jazz, which is just a bunch of people playing, seemingly random. I'm sure there is some rhyme, some reason, not rhyme, some reason for this. Maybe it's even pre-composed and they are very intricately creating this art, but the end result is, at least to me on a first listen, it's perceived as random, as chaotic. Nothing seems to line up with anything else. It's even the spaces between ideas don't seem to have any reason. One time an instrument might play a line and then take a bar off and then come back for another line. Sometimes they'll play a line and take a few bars off before coming back, and sometimes an instrument just won't come back at all. I lack the vision to see the patterns in this section. And I'm sure as well, if I listened to the first half of the track without the underlying foundational work and I listened to just the ornamental flourishes, it too would seem random, which is the perspective that I'm coming into this final section with, is that this is what you get either when a song is missing a foundational component or when you take the inversion of roles in a situation where the roles have very specific needs or very specific jobs. You can't necessarily give the focus to something that kind of doesn't exist too often, that is designed to embellish on an idea. And you can't make a lead idea become an embellishing one. They're just not written the same way. And all of this kind of ties into, oh, there's even an inversion of the production. I had mentioned it goes from clear to fuzzy. Yeah, I think this second half of the song is designed to be an inversion of what came before it in a few ways. Probably even some I haven't talked about, have missed in my first listen, and possibly even I'm wrong in some of my readings. Wrong against the authorial intent, anyways. I still think that that's how I interpret my listening of the song. But it is, at least to my ears, almost an exact opposite. Like when you um, reverse the colors on a picture, and all the light stuff is now black, and all the darker stuff is now light, and you get the inversion of it. Yeah, kind of like that, but with music. And it is something that's a bit more haunting because it's not supposed to be that way. It is very disjointed, disorienting is the word I think I want. And I think it's interesting trying to tie that back to the title. There's a distance in you. I've been trying to figure out what that might mean. And the best I can come up with is that a person might have two sides to them. And I think that's pretty normal. I think there are very few people in the world who present the entire natural self that they know themselves to be. There's always going to be an aspect that they don't publicly share. And of course, that level of publicity is different for various settings. You might have your public self with your family or your partner or your friends. Then there's also your public self to strangers and even your public self that you might showcase on the internet, a more heavily curated version of your public self for strangers. But there's always going to be an aspect of yourself that you don't publicly show, or at least you don't think you do. I think everybody has that aspect, that side to them. It might not be anything harmful or negative. It's not like you're hiding an evil self, but there's aspects of everybody that it's just better they think they keep hidden. I think that's just normal for humans. And I think this song is speaking about a person in specific who the gap between who they are and who they show that they are is extremely wide. So much so that we could say that the person they present themselves to be is an inversion of who they might feel they are on the inside. almost the opposite side of a coin kind of a idea, where it's just they've crafted such a very specific curated self that in some cases the properties of that character they present don't exist at all in who they actually might be. And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. The duality of music, in so much that they've created a sonic inversion of sound, which blows my mind because I can't even say I've even tried to think about anything like that. And the fact that you can so perfectly craft that image into my mind through music is phenomenal. Yeah, I think those are my thoughts on Clark's There's a Distance in You. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up with your thoughts. Let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you have any official authorial intent, interview or a blog post or something from Clark about the meaning of this song and maybe what their intentions were with the second half. Hit me up with that. I'm interested. As usual, when you're done commenting, there's a description box above that with a link to Linktree. It'll take you to this menu right here. It has everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Discord, join the Patreon, follow me on Twitter, a bunch of other stuff. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. And that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We'll continue on with this week's theme of genre fusion, and we'll also check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.